For 60 years, nobody got through, not the journalists, the biographers, the women who loved him, or even Keith Richards. Mick Jagger built the greatest rock band in history behind a wall so thick that no one alive knew who he actually was. He sold out stadiums across 6 continents, buried relationships, and survived a heart surgery that would have finished most men, all while saying absolutely nothing real. But after 6 decades of hiding behind the strut, the lips, and the legend, something shifted. The armor has finally cracked. What Jagger is now admitting about the band, the feuds, and the life behind the curtain is everything fans suspected, and it changes rock history forever.
And Mick Jagger is recovering after reportedly undergoing a heart valve replacement procedure. The Rolling Stones.
The boy who was never supposed to be a rock star. It is October 1961. A train platform in Dartford, England. Cold morning, gray sky. 2 young men who used to be childhood friends bump into each other completely by accident. One of them is carrying a stack of American blues records under his arm, records that were nearly impossible to find in England at the time. The other one has a guitar. They talk and laugh, and they discover they still share the same obsession with American rhythm and blues. In that one random moment, on a platform in a town nobody had ever heard of, the Rolling Stones were born. But here is what most people do not know. The young man carrying those records, he was not supposed to be a rock star. He was supposed to be a businessman. Michael Philip Jagger was born on the 26th of July, 1943, in Dartford, Kent. His father, Basil Fanshawe Jagger, known as Joe, was a physical education teacher. Disciplined, structured, serious about the future. His mother, Eva, was a hairdresser. Ambitious, sharp, a woman who believed in appearances and in doing things properly. This was not a household that produced rebels. It was a household that produced results. From a young age, Mick was bright, curious, unusually confident for a boy his age. He did well in school. He had a sharp mind for figures and for argument. The kind of kid teachers remember. Nobody looked at him and saw a rock star. They saw a future professional, a man who would wear a tie to work and do something respectable. And for a long time, that was exactly where things were headed. In 1961, Mick Jagger enrolled at the London School of Economics. Think about that for a moment. The man who would go on to own every stage on the planet. The man with the strut, lips, and the voice was sitting in economics lectures, taking notes, writing papers. He was good at it too, but something was pulling at him from the other direction. Something that started long before the London School of Economics. Something that began the moment a young Mick Jagger first heard American blues music coming out of a radio and felt it hit him somewhere deep. He had been obsessed with blues and rock and roll since childhood. Chuck Berry, Muddy Waters, Little Richard. These were not just songs to him. They were a different world entirely. A world that felt more real than anything his parents had mapped out for him. And when Keith Richards stepped onto that train platform in Dartford and saw those records under Mick's arm, something clicked. Jagger himself described that moment years later. He told Rolling Stone that Richards saw the records and said they were interesting, and that was how it started. Simple as that. 2 young men, one shared obsession, one accidental morning. But making the decision to leave the London School of Economics and chase a music career was not simple at all, not even close. In a long-form interview with Rolling Stone founder Jan Wenner, Jagger admitted something fans rarely talk about. He said the decision to make the Rolling Stones his full-time pursuit was very, very difficult. Not exciting, not obvious, very, very difficult. That one phrase says everything. Because the image people carry of Mick Jagger is of a man born certain, born confident, and born ready to take the stage and dare the world to keep up with him. But the truth? He was a middle-class boy from a disciplined household, standing at a crossroads, terrified of getting it wrong. His parents had expectations. The world had expectations. And every instinct he had been raised with was telling him to stay in school, finish the degree, and take the safe road. He did not take the safe road, but it cost him something to walk away from it. Soon after the Dartford encounter, Mick and Keith began spending hours together, listening to records, playing music, talking about the sounds coming out of America. They linked up with a young guitarist named Brian Jones, magnetic, troubled, wildly talented. Jones was the one who initially drove the band's direction. He was the one who placed an advertisement in a music paper, looking for like-minded musicians obsessed with rhythm and blues. The band came together quickly after that. They played their first gig at the Marquee Club in London on the 12th of July, 1962. They were rough, unpolished, loud, but something was already there, something undeniable. Mick Jagger left the London School of Economics before finishing his degree. He never went back. Instead, he became the frontman of what would eventually be called the greatest rock and roll band in history. A band that has sold nearly 250 million albums. A band that is still recording new music in their 80s. But here is the question that chapter after chapter of his life keeps raising. If the confidence was not born, if it was built, then who built it? And what was underneath it the whole time? Because the boy who walked away from that economics degree did not walk onto those stages as himself. He walked on as someone else entirely. And the real Mick Jagger? He stayed hidden for a very long time. The feud he finally stopped denying.
Everything. He's always looking for an angle on people, but I can't live like that, you know?
Imagine standing in a room with your oldest friend, someone you have known since you were 7 years old, someone who was there at the very beginning, whose name will forever be linked to yours in the history books. Now imagine that same person publicly calling you a problem, mocking you in interviews, writing things about you in a memoir that your fans cannot stop talking about. And imagine smiling through all of it, telling the press everything is fine. For years, that is exactly what Mick Jagger did, but the cracks were always there. Anyone paying attention could see them. The question was never whether the feud between Mick Jagger and Keith Richards was real. The question was, how bad had it actually gotten? On the surface, they were everything rock and roll promised. The Glimmer Twins, the greatest songwriting partnership in the history of the genre. Two men who had known each other since primary school in Dartford. And somehow ended up co-writing some of the most recognizable songs ever recorded. Satisfaction, Paint It Black, Gimme Shelter, Sympathy for the Devil. Together, Jagger and Richards built something that should not have been possible. A band that kept going, kept selling, kept filling stadiums decade after decade after decade. By the early 1980s, the Rolling Stones were not just a band. They were an institution, but institutions can crack from the inside. And by the mid-80s, this one nearly did. It started with a solo album. In 1985, Mick Jagger released She's the Boss, his first solo record. He followed it with Primitive Cool in 1987. Then Wandering Spirit in 1993. Then Goddess in the Doorway in 2001. 4 solo albums, 4 separate excursions away from the band. To Jagger, it made sense. The Rolling Stones were a machine. A massive, complicated machine with moving parts and competing voices. Going solo gave him the freedom to make decisions without needing approval, to move faster, and to experiment without the weight of the band's history on every choice. But to Keith Richards, it felt like abandonment. Richards did not stay quiet about it. He never stayed quiet about much. He told GQ in 2015 that Jagger's solo records had something to do with ego. He said plainly that he only made his own records because Jagger was not working with the band. He was not wrong about that last part. The Stones essentially stalled every time Jagger turned his attention elsewhere. Momentum dropped. Albums suffered. The tension between the two men reached a point where basic communication broke down. Then came the memoir. In 2010, Keith Richards published Life, one of the most brutally honest rock autobiographies ever written. It became a bestseller almost immediately. And inside it, Richards said things about Jagger that shocked even the most hardened Stones fans. He referred to Jagger's anatomy in a mocking way that went viral. Before viral was even a word, people used the way they use it now. He questioned Jagger's masculinity. He said that fame had changed him in ways that were not flattering. Jagger did not respond with the same fire, but he did not pretend it did not sting. He told interviewers at the time that he found the book hurtful, that certain things Richards had written crossed a line, and after everything they had been through together, he had not expected that level of public exposure. That right there was the admission fans had been waiting for, because for the first time, Jagger dropped the carefully managed neutrality. He let something real show through. Richards, for his part, has always maintained that their friction was not a weakness, it was the engine. In a 2018 interview with WSJ magazine, he said it plainly. He and Jagger lived off the fire between them. The tension was not a problem to be solved. It was the source of everything good they ever made together. And in their twilight years, something shifted. Richards wrote in Life that he and Jagger may not be friends in the conventional sense. Too much wear and tear for that, he said. But they were the closest of brothers, and that, he wrote, could not be severed. When the band appeared on The Tonight Show with Jimmy Fallon in 2024 to promote Hackney Diamonds, their first studio album in 18 years, Fallon asked them the secret to their long relationship. Jagger answered without missing a beat, "Not speaking too often." Richards leaned in. How to say "shut up," the audience laughed. But anyone who had followed this relationship for 60 years heard something else underneath the joke, something harder, something true. Because here is what Mick Jagger finally stopped denying. The partnership with Richards was never easy. It was never meant to be easy. Two men with that much ambition and that much pride locked together for 6 decades. There was never going to be a version of that story without fire. But the fire never burned the whole thing down. In 2025, with both men 82 years old, the follow-up to Hackney Diamonds was reportedly 75% complete. A new album, new music, after everything. Jagger admitted in recent interviews that the Stones were likely to release new work soon. Not a farewell, not a greatest hits cash-in. New work from two men who, by every reasonable measure, should have destroyed each other decades ago. Which raises the deeper question, the one nobody has ever fully answered. What is it that actually holds them together? Because it is not friendship, not in the ordinary sense. And it is not just money, legacy, or habit. It is something older than all of that, something that goes back to a train platform in Dartford, to a stack of blues records, to a guitar, something that Mick Jagger has never been able to name out loud, but fans always suspected was there. 4,000 women and the one he could not save.
Parent suicide.
And this just goes to show you, you never know what's really going on, because I can't get this out of my head. This is somebody who seemed to have it all.
March 17, 2014, Manhattan. A 9-floor apartment on West 13th Street, worth $5.6 million, paid off completely. Inside, a woman is found dead. She is 49 years old, 6 feet 3 inches tall. One of the most elegant, most quietly powerful figures in the fashion world. A woman who dressed Nicole Kidman, Oprah Winfrey, and Michelle Obama. A woman who built a label from nothing and turned it into something extraordinary. And she is the woman who loved Mick Jagger for 13 years. Her name was Loren Scott, and when the news broke, the world did not just mourn a fashion designer. It asked a question nobody wanted to say out loud: what really happened in that relationship? But to understand Loren Scott, you have to first understand the pattern that came before her. Because Mick Jagger's romantic history is not just a tabloid story, it is a map, and if you follow it carefully enough, it tells you something about the man that no interview ever fully captured. Start with the numbers. Biographer Christopher Anderson spent years researching Jagger's life for his book, simply titled Mick. What he found was staggering. He estimated that over the course of his life, Jagger had been intimate with more than 4,000 women. 4,000. Anderson did not present this as a boast. He presented it as a fact. And he added that in retrospect, that number might even be conservative. Fans had always suspected the scale of Jagger's appetite. The groupies, the models, the actresses, the rumors that followed him from city to city, continent to continent, decade to decade. But 4,000 made it real, in a way that rumors never could. Then came the marriages. In 1971, Jagger married Bianca Perez Mora Macia, a Nicaraguan socialite he met at a Rolling Stones party in France. She was sharp, beautiful, and unwilling to be managed. The marriage collapsed almost as quickly as it began. Infidelity on both sides, constant tension. By 1978, it was over. He married again in 1990, this time to Jerry Hall, the Texas model who had already been with him for years. They had 4 children together. The marriage appeared, at least from the outside, to have some stability. It did not last either. In 1999, it emerged that Jagger had fathered a child with Brazilian model Luciana Gimenez. The marriage to Jerry Hall collapsed immediately after. Hall later described the end as devastating. Jagger walked away, as he had before, as he would again. By the time he met Loren Scott in 2001, he had 8 children across multiple relationships. He had left a trail of pain behind him that stretched across 3 decades, and yet, Loren Scott stayed. She stayed for 13 years. People who knew them both described her devotion to Jagger as absolute. She did not use his name to promote her fashion label. Even when her business was drowning in debt, she did not sell stories. She did not complain publicly. A source close to Scott told the press that she loved him so deeply, she never wanted to hurt him, that she was terrified of losing him. That keeping him was the thing she wanted most. Meanwhile, rumors circulated that Jagger had begun a relationship with Melanie Hamrick, a young ballerina more than 3 decades his junior. Scott's inner circle reportedly knew. The pressure on her was immense. Her fashion label, LS Fashion Limited, was in serious financial trouble by 2012, nearly $6 million in debt. She had canceled a London fashion show just weeks before her death, citing production delays. She was carrying everything alone. On the morning of March 17, Scott's assistant arrived at the apartment and made the discovery. The New York City medical examiner ruled her death a suicide. Jagger released a statement the following day. He wrote that he was still struggling to understand how his lover and best friend could end her life in this tragic way. He said they had spent many wonderful years together and made a great life, and he would never forget her. It was careful and pained, but it did not answer the question hanging over everything. Fans who had followed his pattern for decades felt the weight of what was not being said. Later, when asked how he had coped, Jagger admitted something quietly devastating. He said he got back into it by touring with the Stones in Europe, by working on other projects, by keeping moving. He coped the only way he knew how. He ran. In 2016, Melanie Hamrick gave birth to Jagger's 8th child, a son. Jagger was 72 years old. He did not slow down. He never slows down. And that is the thing fans had quietly understood for years before he ever came close to admitting it. That the running, touring, women, movement, and the noise was never really about pleasure. It was about avoidance. Every stadium, every city, every night on stage in front of 50,000 people. All of it was distance. Distance from stillness and grief. Distance from the version of himself that sat quietly in a room and felt the weight of everything he had left behind. Loren Scott saw that man. She loved him anyway. And when she was gone, Jagger did the only thing he knew how to do. He went back on the road. The heart that almost stopped. May 25th, 2019, Soldier Field, Chicago. 60,000 people packed into one of the most iconic stadiums in America. The noise was deafening. The lights were blinding. And walking out onto that stage, moving the way he has always moved, commanding the space the way only one man on earth can, was Mick Jagger, 75 years old, fresh out of heart surgery. The crowd lost their minds. And nobody watching that night would have guessed that just weeks earlier, this same man had been lying in a hospital bed in New York City with doctors working on his heart. Nobody would have guessed that the tour had been canceled in a panic, that the band had gone silent, that for a brief, terrifying window of time, nobody knew if Mick Jagger would ever perform again. But here he was, strutting, spinning, pointing at the crowd like he owned every single one of them. So how did we get here? And what did almost losing everything finally force him to admit? Go back to March 30th, 2019. The Rolling Stones were days away from launching the North American leg of their no-filter tour. Stadiums booked, tickets sold out, anticipation at a fever pitch. Then the announcement came. The tour was being postponed. Jagger required medical treatment. No further details were given initially. The music world stopped. Speculation exploded immediately. What was wrong with him? How serious was it? Was this the end? Jagger posted a message to fans that same day. He said he was devastated to postpone the tour. He said he would be working very hard to get back on stage as soon as possible. He apologized, more than once. It was the most vulnerable public statement Mick Jagger had made in years. And even then, he kept the real details close. What emerged in the days that followed was this. Jagger had been diagnosed with aortic stenosis, a condition where the aortic valve, the main valve that controls blood flow out of the heart, had narrowed severely, calcified, stiffened to the point where blood could barely pass through it properly. Think about what that means for a man who dances for 2.5 hours straight every single night. The heart was straining against itself. Every performance had been a battle. His body was quietly losing. And Jagger, the man who had spent 60 years projecting invincibility, had said nothing. He had been performing through it. Doctors moved quickly. He underwent a transcatheter aortic valve replacement, a minimally invasive procedure where surgeons thread a catheter through a major artery and replace the valve without opening the chest. No cracking of the sternum, no heart-lung machine. The operation was performed in New York City, and it worked. The recovery was almost as astonishing as the surgery itself. Within days of the procedure, Jagger was photographed walking in a park, smiling, moving, posting the photo to social media with a caption that read, "A walk in the park." 2 words. Completely Jagger. A few weeks later, he posted a video of himself in a dance studio, running through choreography, light on his feet, moving the way men 40 years younger could not move. The doctors had described his overall health as remarkable for a man his age. He jogged up to 8 miles a day. He practiced yoga and cycled. He ate with discipline. He had maintained his body with the same obsessive focus he applied to everything else in his life. That discipline is what made the recovery possible. But it also raised a harder question, because here is what the heart surgery exposed that Jagger had never quite admitted before. The fitness, diet, and the relentless schedule. The refusal to stop or slow down or take a year away from the road. Fans had always assumed it was vanity, or competitiveness, or simply the nature of a man who was built differently from everyone else. After the surgery, after watching him recover faster than seemed humanly reasonable, and then walk back onto a stadium stage like nothing had happened, a different picture began to form. The discipline was not just about health. It was about control. Mick Jagger had built an entire life around controlling his image, output, relationships, and his narrative. The body was simply another thing to be controlled. Another area where weakness could not be permitted. Another front in the battle against vulnerability. And for decades, it had worked, until his own heart had other ideas. The Chicago show that May became something more than a comeback concert. It became a statement. 60,000 people watching a 75-year-old man with a brand new heart valve perform Satisfaction as an encore. Dancing, riffing, alive. Rolling Stone called it one of the most extraordinary returns in rock history. But what struck people closest to Jagger was something smaller, something quieter. In the weeks after the surgery, before the tour resumed, those around him noticed a shift. Not dramatic, not the kind of transformation that makes headlines. Just a man who had stared at the ceiling of a hospital room and felt, perhaps for the first time in decades, genuinely still. No stage, crowd, or movement. Just the sound of his own heart. Fixed, beating, fragile in a way he had never allowed himself to acknowledge. He never gave a long interview about what the surgery meant to him emotionally. He never sat down and unpacked it the way fans wanted him to. But the admission was there, quietly, between the lines. A man who had spent 60 years running from stillness had been forced to stop, and he survived it, which made the next question inevitable. If the body is not invincible, if the heart can fail, and the walls can crack, and the armor can slip, then what else had Mick Jagger been hiding, and how much longer could he keep it hidden? What he finally said out loud. There is a moment in every long life when the performance becomes too heavy to carry, when the gap between the person you built for the world and the person you actually are becomes impossible to maintain. For most people, that moment comes quietly, in private, behind closed doors. For Mick Jagger, it happened in front of everyone, slowly, over years. In interviews he almost did not give, in statements he almost did not make, and in small cracks that appeared in the armor and let just enough light through for the world to finally see what was underneath. And what fans had suspected all along was this: the man behind the legend was not fearless. He was just very, very good at pretending to be. Start with what he said about being interviewed. Jagger has always hated it, not performing, but sitting across from a journalist and being asked to explain himself, to justify, to reveal. A typical session with a journalist, those close to him have said, lasted about 20 minutes. He answered what he had to answer. He deflected what he could deflect, and then he left. He once told Rolling Stone founder Jan Wenner that he had everything to gain by holding on to what privacy he had left. including, he said, the privacy of his thinking. The privacy of his thinking. That phrase matters, because it tells you that behind every interview, every press launch, every carefully managed public appearance, there was a man actively protecting something, guarding a version of himself that the world was never supposed to see. But the admissions came anyway, not in one dramatic confession, not in a tell-all memoir or a tearful interview. Jagger was never going to give anyone that. They came in pieces. He admitted the decision to leave the London School of Economics and pursue music had been very, very difficult. Not the act of a born rebel. The act of a frightened young man making a bet on himself. He admitted the feud with Richards had been real, that the memoir had hurt him, that certain things crossed a line, small words, but for Mick Jagger, enormous. He admitted he coped with Loren Scott's death by going straight back to work, by touring and moving, not by grieving in any way the people around him could see. He admitted, through the silence around his heart surgery, that he had been performing through a serious medical condition without telling anyone, that the invincibility was managed, maintained, not real. Each admission was small on its own. Together they drew a portrait fans had suspected for 60 years. Then came the family. Jagger has 8 children by 4 different women, across 5 decades. He has spoken about fatherhood in interviews, but always at a careful distance, always with the same controlled warmth he applies to everything personal. But in early 2026, something shifted the conversation. Alexander Key, the longtime partner of Jagger's granddaughter, Assisi Jackson, went missing. Missing from his home in a remote coastal town in the United Kingdom. He was 37 years old. After nearly 2 weeks, he was found dead at sea. Weeks later, Jagger's partner Melanie Hamrick was physically attacked outside Annabelle's in Mayfair, London. She posted about the incident on social media before deleting it. 2 brutal events, back to back, within the same family circle. Sources close to Jagger said the incidents forced him to reassess his priorities, that for a man who had always kept moving, always kept the focus outward, on the band, the stage, and the music, these events brought everything inward. For the first time in a long time, the world outside the tour bus demanded his full attention. And then there is the music. Because whatever you believe about Mick Jagger, the man, the persona, relationships, contradictions, and the music does not lie. In 2023, the Rolling Stones released Hackney Diamonds, their first studio album in 18 years. And it was not a nostalgia project. It was not a victory lap. It was alive, sharp and urgent and present. The work of a band that still had something to say. Critics who had written the Stones off a decade earlier were forced to reconsider. And then, almost immediately, Jagger confirmed what was coming next, a follow-up album. Already in progress, reportedly 75% complete as of 2025, no official title. No release date confirmed, but coming. At 82 years old, Mick Jagger is still making new work. Not because the industry demands it, not because the money requires it, because without it, he does not know who he is. And that is the admission that cuts deepest, not the 4,000 women or the feud, not the heart surgery, not the grief he buried under 50 years of touring. The deepest admission is the simplest one. Mick Jagger needs the Rolling Stones the way other people need air. He built the band and shaped it. He fought for control of it and nearly walked away from it. He outlived one of its founders and watched another slip into illness. He carried it through decades of chaos and contradiction and loss, and he is still carrying it. Because the stage is the only place where all of the contradictions make sense, where the frightened boy from Dartford and the most famous rock star alive can exist in the same body without one of them destroying the other. Off the stage, Mick Jagger is a complicated, grieving, fiercely private man who has spent his entire adult life running from stillness. On the stage, he is exactly who he always wanted to be. And the gap between those two things, that space between the man and the myth, is what fans have always sensed without being able to name. He never gave them the full confession, but piece by piece, admission by admission, crack by crack in the armor, he gave them enough to finally understand. Mick Jagger will never sit down and tell you everything. That is not who he is. It was never going to be who he is. But over 60 years, through the feuds, funerals, surgeries, scandals, stages, and the silences, He has told us more than he intended. He showed us a boy who was terrified to bet on himself, and bet anyway. He showed us a man who ran from grief until his legs gave out. Mick revealed what it looks like to be human inside a legend. And if you have been a fan, if you have ever felt something standing in that crowd, you already knew. You just needed him to finally say it. If this story moved you, hit subscribe. There is so much more where this came from.